when a desperate young mother knocks on a lonely farmer's door. She's seeking shelter, but what she finds could be the family she never had. But just as healing begins, danger from the past threatens to tear it all apart. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The sun was setting over Maple Hollow Farm, casting long shadows across the fields. Jacob Hayes wiped the sweat from his brow as he finished feeding the last of his calves. At 30 years old, he had settled into a quiet, lonely routine. The farm that had once been filled with laughter and love was now silent except for the occasional moo of a cow or the rustling of calm wind through the cornfields. Jacob tossed the empty feed bucket aside and slung a towel over his shoulder. His flannel shirt was stained with a day's work, and his jeans were covered in dirt, but he didn't mind. Work kept his hands busy and his mind from wandering to places too painful to visit. Another day done, he mumbled to himself as he walked toward the farmhouse. It was a beautiful two-story home with a wraparound porch that his grandfather had built with his own hands. Now it was just Jacob rattling around inside, with too many empty rooms and too many memories. He was about to step inside when he heard the sound of tires on gravel. Visitors were rare at Maple Hollow, especially at this hour. Jacob turned to see a beat-up sedan crawling up his driveway, the engine making a concerning rattling noise before it finally died about 20 feet from his front porch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and a young woman stepped out. Even from a distance, Jacob could see the exhaustion in her movements. She reached back into the car and pulled out what looked like a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. A diaper bag was slung over her shoulder. Jacob stood frozen on his porch, watching as the woman approached. Her clothes were rumpled, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, but it was her eyes that caught his attention. They held a mixture of desperation and determination that made his heart ache. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you Jacob Hayes?" Jacob nodded, taking a step forward. "That's me. Can I help you?" The woman clutched the bundle, which Jacob now realized was a sleeping baby, tighter to her chest. "My name is Rosa Santiago. My car broke down about 10 miles back. I walked the rest of the way. My phone is dead." And she hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Someone told me if I ever needed real kindness, I should find Jacob Hayes." Jacob's brow furrowed. He couldn't imagine who would have sent this woman to him. Since losing his wife 3 years ago, he'd kept to himself, barely interacting with anyone beyond what was necessary for running the farm. "Do you have a place?" Rosa continued, her voice cracking slightly. "Just for one night. For me and my baby. I can pay you something." "I don't have much, but come inside," Jacob interrupted, stepping aside to make room for her to pass. "It's getting cold out here, not good for the little one." Relief washed over Rosa's face, but Jacob could see the caution in her eyes. She hesitated for just a moment before stepping onto the porch. "Thank you," she whispered. "There's a whole home waiting for you both," Jacob said simply. "Come in." The warmth of the farmhouse enveloped them as they stepped inside. Jacob led Rosa to the kitchen where the remains of his simple dinner still sat on the table. "Sorry about the mess," he said, quickly clearing away the dishes. "Haven't had visitors in a while." Rosa stood awkwardly in the doorway, gently rocking her baby who had started to stir. "I don't want to impose, really. Just a couch for the night would be fine. We'll be gone in the morning." Jacob filled a glass with water and handed it to her. "You're not imposing, and you look like you could use more than just one night's rest." He nodded toward the baby. "Boy or girl?" "Boy," Rosa answered, taking a sip of water. "His name is Nico. He's 4 months old." As if on cue, Nico's eyes fluttered open, and he let out a small whimper. Rosa immediately tensed, bouncing him gently. "He's probably hungry," she said. "I have some formula in the bag, if I could just warm it up. "Of course," Jacob said, reaching for the kettle on the stove. "Let me help you with that." 10 minutes later, Nico was happily drinking from his bottle, and Rosa had sunk into a kitchen chair, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "So," Jacob said, sitting across from her, "who sent you to me?" Rosa's eyes dropped to her son, Maria Gonzalez. "She used to work at the diner in town. She said you helped her once when she was in trouble." Jacob nodded slowly, remembering the young waitress whose car he'd fixed free of charge a few years back. "Maria, she's a good person." "She is," Rosa agreed. "She was the only one who... She trailed off, biting her lip. "You don't have to tell me anything," Jacob assured her. "Let's just focus on getting you and Nico settled for tonight. You can have the guest room upstairs. It's been a while since it's been used, but the sheets are clean." Rosa looked up, surprise evident on her face. "The guest room? I told you, I can sleep on the couch." "I don't want to. It's no trouble," Jacob interrupted gently. "The room is just sitting there empty. Might as well be used." An hour later, Jacob showed Rosa to the guest room on the second floor. It was a simple room with a double bed, a dresser, and a rocking chair by the window that overlooked the back fields. "Bathrooms across the hall," Jacob said, placing her small bag on the dresser. "Towels are in the cabinet, if you need anything else. My room is at the end of the hall. Don't hesitate to knock." Rosa stood in the middle of the room, Nico asleep in her arms again. "I don't know how to thank you." Jacob shook his head. No need for thanks, get some rest. We can figure out your car situation in the morning. He turned to leave but paused at the door. Rosa, she looked up. You're safe here, he said simply, then closed the door behind him, downstairs. Jacob sat at his kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. What was he doing, letting strangers into his home? He hadn't invited anyone to stay since Sarah died. The thought of someone using her rocking chair, sleeping in the guest bed she'd so carefully made up with flowered sheets, it should have bothered him, but somehow it didn't. There was something about Rosa's eyes, the mixture of fear and fierce protectiveness when she looked at her son, that had struck a chord in him. Jacob sighed and pushed away from the table. He'd get up early, take a look at her car, and then she'd be on her way. One night of kindness, that's all this was. But as he climbed the stairs to his own bedroom, he couldn't help but pause outside the guest room door. The sound of soft singing drifted through a Spanish lullaby, he guessed, though he couldn't understand the words. The melody was sweet and sad all at once. Jacob continued to his room, but the sound of Rosa's voice followed him into his dreams. Morning came with a pale, yellow sunrise. Jacob was up with the dawn, as always. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs to start his chores, careful to be quiet as he passed the guest room. To his surprise, he found Rosa already in the kitchen, Nico strapped to her chest in some kind of wrap. She was standing at the stove, spatula in hand. Good morning, she said when she saw him. I hope you don't mind. I found some eggs and bread. I wanted to do something to thank you for letting us stay. Jacob was momentarily speechless. It had been years since anyone had cooked breakfast for him. The kitchen smelled of coffee and toast, and for just a second, the emptiness that had been his constant companion seemed to recede. You didn't have to do that, he finally said, moving to pour himself a cup of coffee. I wanted to, Rosa replied, sliding scrambled eggs onto a plate. It's the least I can do. They ate in a surprisingly comfortable silence, broken only by occasional coos and gurgles. When they finished, Rosa immediately stood to clear the dishes. I'll do that, Jacob said, but she shook her head. Please, let me, you've been so kind. She hesitated, then added, I was thinking, if you could just tell me where the nearest mechanic is. I'll call them to tow my car. Once my phone is charged, that is. Jacob considered this as he sipped his coffee. Actually, I could take a look at it first. I'm pretty good with engines. Might save you some money. Relief flashed across Rosa's face. That would be amazing, but I don't want to keep you from your work. The cows can wait an hour, Jacob said with a small smile. Let me get my tools. The morning air was crisp as they walked out to Rosa's car. Nico was awake now, his dark eyes taking in the world around him. When Jacob made a silly face at him, the baby broke into a gummy smile that hit Jacob right in the heart. He likes you, Rosa said softly. Jacob cleared his throat and turned his attention to the car. After a few minutes of inspection, he straightened up with a frown. It's your timing belt, he said, and it looks like there might be some issues with your transmission too. This isn't a quick fix, Rosa. Rosa's face fell. How much do you think it will cost? Jacob wiped his hands on a rag, choosing his words carefully. It's hard to say without getting deeper into it. That was enough. The next morning, Karina woke to the sound of rain pattering against the cabin roof. She groaned, knowing that outdoor photography would be limited today. Still, rain on a farm created its own kind of beauty, reflections in puddles, workers in colorful raincoats, droplets on crops. She dressed quickly and headed out, protecting her camera under her jacket. As she approached the barn, she saw Adam talking with a woman she hadn't met before. The woman was beautiful, with long, blonde hair and an expansive-looking raincoat. They seemed to be having an intense conversation. Karina hesitated, not wanting to interrupt. She turned to leave, but Adam spotted her. Karina, he called. Come meet my sister Rebecca. Relieved it was just his sister, Karina approached them. With a smile, nice to meet you. Rebecca Walker gave her a quick once-over and offered a thin smile. So you're the photographer Adam mentioned. Taking pictures of cows and corn, is it? Karina kept her expression neutral, among other things. Becky's just stopping by on her way to the city, Adam explained, giving his sister a look that Karina couldn't quite interpret. Yes, some of us have actual jobs, Rebecca said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Speaking of which, have you thought any more about my offer, Adam? Adam's jaw tightened slightly. We can talk about it later. Rebecca sighed dramatically. Fine, be stubborn, she turned to Karina. It was nice meeting you. Good luck with your ... project. After Rebecca drove away in her luxury SUV, Adam looked apologetic. Sorry about that. My sister thinks I should sell the farm to developers. She's been pushing for years. Would you ever consider it? Karina asked, surprised. Adam shook his head. Firmly, never. This land is more than just property to me. It's my heritage, my responsibility. He looked around at the rain-soaked fields. Besides, I love it here. I can't imagine doing anything else. Karina nodded, understanding that kind of passion. It was how she felt about photography. Anyway, Adam said, changing the subject, rainy day activities around here include fixing equipment, catching up on paperwork, and Mary's famous apple pie cooking lessons. Any of those appeal to you? I think I'll try to capture some rainy day scenes, Karina replied. But I wouldn't say no to pie later. Adam laughed, the tension from his sister's visit seeming to fade. I'll save you a slice. Throughout the day, Karina photographed the farm in the rain droplets sliding down the red barn walls, puddles reflecting the cloudy sky, farmhands in bright yellow raincoats moving between buildings. The images had a different quality than her sunny day shots, more intimate, somehow more revealing. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, and a warm, humid mist hung over the farm. Karina was walking back to her cabin to change her wet clothes when she spotted Adam standing alone by the fence, looking out at his fields. Without thinking, she raised her camera and captured his silhouette against the misty backdrop. There, with something in his posture, a mixture of strength and vulnerability that spoke to her, Adam turned, catching her in the act. Should I charge you extra for portraits? He joked. Karina lowered her camera, feeling oddly embarrassed. Sorry, professional habit. You looked, contemplative. Just checking for storm damage, he said, but his expression suggested he'd been thinking about more than just his crops. How did your rainy day photography go? Really well, actually, Karina admitted. Sometimes unexpected conditions create the best opportunities. Adam smiled, and something in his eyes made her heart beat faster. That's true in farming too, and in life. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Karina was the first to look away. I should go change into dry clothes, she said, taking a step back. Right, Adam nodded. And I promised you pie. Mary saved a slice for you in the kitchen. That evening, after a simple dinner with the farm crew, Karina sat on the porch of her cabin, reviewing her day's photos. The farm was quiet except for the occasional animal sound and the distant murmur of the river. She paused on the photo of Adam by the fence, studying his profile. There was something about him that kept drawing her eye, her lens, something authentic and grounded that she wasn't used to in the men she'd known. A knock on her door startled her when she opened it. Adam stood there holding a thermos. Thought, you might like some tea, he said. It gets chilly after the rain. Karina hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Thanks, that's thoughtful. Adam handed her the thermos but didn't make any move to leave. I was hoping to talk to you about something. Actually, Karina felt a flutter of anxiety. Oh, county fair is this weekend, he said. It's a big deal around here, livestock competitions, local crafts, that sort of thing. It would be a good opportunity for your project. That sounds perfect, Karina said, relieved it was about work. I was thinking I could show you around, Adam continued. Introduce you to some of the local farmers. People who might normally be Karina poured herself a cup of tea, using the moment to gather her thoughts. Adam was offering her valuable access for her project. It would be foolish to refuse just because she was afraid of spending time with him. That would be really helpful, she said finally. Thank you. Adam smiled, and the warmth in his eyes made something shift inside her. Great, we'll head out. Saturday morning after he left, Karina sat for a long time staring at the closed door. This was dangerous territory. Adam Walker was kind, hard-working, and genuine, everything Marco had pretended to be, and that was precisely the problem. She'd been fooled before by a good act. She couldn't trust her judgment anymore. It's just for the project, she told herself firmly, nothing more. But as she lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of the countryside through her open window, she couldn't ignore the small spark of anticipation she felt when thinking about Saturday. The county fair was everything Adam had promised and more, a vibrant celebration of rural life with competitive exhibits, craft stalls, food vendors, and carnival rides. The fairgrounds bustled with families, farmers, and locals of all ages. Adam proved to be the perfect guide, introducing Karina to everyone from the elderly couple who won the jam competition every year to the teenager, showing her sheep. People who might have been suspicious of a city photographer with an expensive camera welcomed her when she came with Adam. Everyone seems to respect you, Karina observed as they walked between exhibits. Adam shrugged modestly. I've known most of these people my whole life. That's how it is in small communities. You build trust over time. And do you trust them? Karina asked, thinking about how different this was from her life in the city. Most of them, Adam said, with a small smile, enough to know who I can count on when things get tough. By midday, Karina had taken hundreds of photos, candid shots of children with cotton candy, old farmers comparing notes on crops, young couples on the Ferris wheel. Adam stayed by her side, patient and helpful, occasionally suggesting subjects or angles she might have missed. Hungry? He asked as they passed a row of food stalls. Starving, Karina admitted. They shared a meal of barbecue sandwiches and fresh lemonade, sitting at a picnic table under a large tree for the first time. Since arriving at Riverbend, Karina felt herself truly relaxing around Adam. His company was easy he didn't fill silences with meaningless chatter, and when he did speak, he had something worth saying. That the afternoon wore on, clouds began to gather, and the air grew heavy with the promise of another storm. We should probably head back soon, Adam said, glancing at the sky. Unless there's something else you want to photograph. Karina was about to say she had enough when she spotted a small girl about 7 years old, crying near the cotton candy stand. "Hold on," she said to Adam, moving toward the child. "Hey there, are you okay?" The little girl looked up with tear-stained cheeks. "I can't find my mommy." "We'll help you find her," Karina assured her, kneeling down to the girl's level. "I'm Karina, and this is my friend Adam. What's your name?" "Lily," the girl sniffled. Adam knelt down to, "Hi Lily, can you tell us what your mommy looks like?" As Lily described her mother, Karina was struck by how naturally Adam spoke to the child, no talking down, just gentle questions and reassurance. Together, they walked with Lily through the fairgrounds, keeping her calm by asking about her favorite animals and rides. Within 15 minutes, they spotted a frantic woman who matched Lily's description. The reunion was emotional, with the mother alternating between hugging her daughter and thanking Adam and Karina profusely. As they walked back to Adam's truck, the first fat raindrops began to fall. "That was really nice, what you did," Karina said. "You're good with kids." Adam glanced at her as they quickened their pace. "So are you. You knew exactly how to calm her down." By the time they reached the truck, the rain was coming down in sheets. They climbed in, laughing and shaking water from their hair. "Well, at least we had most of the day," Adam said, starting the engine. "I moved in with a friend, got a job waiting tables, but with childcare costs, ... She shook her head. "I was drowning." "Is that why you left to find a fresh start?" Rosa's expression darkened. "No, I left because Miguel came back." Jacob felt a chill despite the warm evening. "What happened?" "He showed up at the restaurant where I worked, said he'd made a mistake, that he wanted to be a family." Rosa's voice was barely above a whisper now. "I almost believed him. That's the scary part. I was so desperate for help, for Nico to have a father, that I almost fell for his lies again." "But you didn't," Jacob said. Rosa shook her head. "No, because that same night, I overheard him on the phone. He wasn't back for us. He was in trouble. Gambling debts. He thought if he had Nico he could use him to get money from his parents." Jacob's jaw tightened. "He wanted to use his own son as a prop," Rosa confirmed. "I confronted him, and she trailed off, her hand unconsciously rising to her cheek. "Let's just say he didn't like being called out on his lies." "He hit you," Jacob said, anger rising in his voice. Rosa nodded. "That's when I knew we had to leave. That night, I packed everything I could fit in Miguel's car. Yes, I took his car, the one thing he actually owned, and just drove. I had no plan, no destination, just away from him." "How did you end up here?" Jacob asked. "I stopped at a diner about 100 miles from Boston. I was exhausted, Nico was crying, and I just needed a moment to think. The waitress there was Maria. She saw me crying in the bathroom and ... Rosa smiled at the memory. "She was so kind. She gave me a free meal, helped me calm Nico down. When I told her I had nowhere to go, she wrote down your name and address that said you were the kindest man she'd ever met." Jacob felt warmth spread through his chest at Maria's words, though he barely remembered the young waitress he'd helped years ago. "I kept driving for 2 days," Rosa continued, "sleeping in the car at rest stops, barely eating so I could save money for Nico's formula. Then the car started making that terrible noise, and finally died about 10 miles from here. So I walked, carrying Nico and praying that Maria was right about you." Jacob was quiet for a long moment, processing everything Rosa had told him. Then, gently, he placed his hand over hers on the swing. "She was right to send you here, and you were brave to leave. Some people spend their whole lives trapped in bad situations because they're too afraid to walk away." Rosa turned her hand over, her fingers interlacing with his. The simple touch sent warmth up Jacob's arm. "I'm still afraid," she admitted. "Afraid he'll find us. Afraid I won't be able to give Nico the life he deserves." "You don't have to be afraid here," Jacob said softly. "You're safe at Maple Hollow." They sat in silence for a while, hands joined, the porch swing moving gently back and forth. Finally, Rosa spoke again. "I never asked about your wife. Tell me about Sarah." Jacob's chest tightened at the mention of her name. It had been so long since he'd spoken about Sarah to anyone. She was ... sunshine. That's the best way I can describe her. Always smiling, always finding the good in everything. "How did you meet?" A small smile tugged at Jacob's lips. "High school. She was new in town, and I was the shy farm boy who could barely string 2 words together around pretty girls. But Sarah ... double quotes." He chuckled at the memory. "She marched right up to me in the cafeteria and announced that I was taking her to the homecoming dance." Rosa laughed. "Bold move." "That was Sarah," Jacob agreed. "We were together from that day on. Got married right after college. We had so many plans, traveling, expanding the farm, starting a family." His smile faded. "Then she started getting these headaches. Terrible ones. By the time they diagnosed the brain tumor, it was already too late. They gave her 6 months. She made it almost a year, fighting all the way." "I'm so sorry," Rosa whispered, squeezing his hand. "The hardest part was watching her slip away," Jacob continued, his voice rough with emotion. "By the end, she didn't even know who I was most days. But sometimes, just for a moment, she'd look at me and smile, really smile, like she used to, and I'd have my Sarah back then. She'd be gone again." "How long ago?" 3 years, 2 months and 14 days, Jacob said without hesitation. After she died, I just shut down, focused on the farm, cut myself off from friends, family. It was easier than feeling the emptiness. Rosa nodded, understanding. Grief changes you. Yes, Jacob agreed, but the past 2 weeks, having you and Nico here, he hesitated, unsure how to express what he was feeling. The house feels alive again. I'd forgotten what that was like. Rosa's eyes met his, warm and dark in the porch light. I'm glad we came here, Jacob. For the first time in so long, I feel like I can breathe. Something shifted between them in that moment. A connection deepening, a trust building. Jacob found himself wanting to lean closer, to bridge the small distance between them. Before he could move, a cry from inside broke the silence. Nico waking from his sleep. Rosa reluctantly pulled her hand away and stood up. I should check on him, she said. Jacob nodded. Of course. At the door, Rosa paused and looked back. Thank you for listening, for not judging. Never, Jacob said simply. After Rosa went inside, Jacob remained on the porch swing, his thoughts a jumble of emotions he hadn't felt in years. He was falling for Rosa, her strength, her devotion to her son, the way she hummed Spanish lullabies when she thought no one was listening. But was it too soon? Was he betraying Sarah's memory? And even if he wasn't, Rosa was healing from her own wounds. The last thing she needed was pressure from him. Jacob sighed and stood up. Whatever was happening between them, it would have to unfold in its own time. For now, it was enough that they were here, together, finding comfort in each other's company. The next morning, Jacob was surprised to find the kitchen empty when he came in from his early chores. Usually, Rosa was already up, making breakfast with Nico in his portable playpen nearby. Concern pricked at him as he climbed the stairs to the guest room. The door was open, and he could hear Rosa's voice inside, talking to Nico, but her tone was different, urgent, worried. Jacob knocked gently on the doorframe. Rosa, everything okay? She looked up, startled. Her face was pale and she was holding her phone in one hand while cradling Nico with the other. He found me, she said, her voice shaking. Miguel, he sent me a text. Somehow he got this number and he says he knows I'm in this area. Jacob's blood ran cold. What exactly did he say? Rosa handed him the phone. The message was simple but threatening. I know you're hiding in Jefferson County. I'll find you and my son. You can't keep running. How would he know you're here? Jacob asked, handing the phone back. Rosa shook her head. I don't know. Maybe he tracked the car somehow. Or maybe he found Maria and she accidentally let something slip. She began pacing, Nico sensing her distress and becoming fussy. I need to leave today. If he finds us here, he'll try to take Nico. Slow down, Jacob said, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. First of all, Jefferson County is big. There are dozens of towns, hundreds of farms. Even if he knows you're in the county, that doesn't mean he knows exactly where. But what if he does find us? I can't put you in the middle of this, Jacob. Miguel can be dangerous when he's angry. Jacob's jaw set in a hard line. I'm not afraid of him, and I'm not letting you run again. Not unless that's what you really want. Rosa looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. What choice do I have? I have to. Protect Nico. We'll protect Nico together, Jacob said firmly. You have rights as his mother. If Miguel tries anything, we'll get the law involved. The law, Rosa repeated with a bitter laugh. Miguel has money for lawyers, I don't. And he can be very convincing when he wants to be. Then we'll be more convincing, Jacob insisted. Rosa, running isn't the answer. You and Nico deserve stability, a home. If you keep running, Miguel wins. Rosa sank onto the bed, bouncing Nico gently as she thought. I'm scared. Jacob, I know, he said, sitting beside her. But you're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Rosa looked at him, searching his face. Why would you do this for us? Take on our problems. Jacob reached out and gently touched Nico's cheek. The baby grabbed his finger, holding on tight. Because in the short time you've been here, you and Nico have become important to me. More important than I thought possible. Rosa's eyes softened. Jacob, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that you have someone in your corner. Someone who cares what happens to you both. Rosa was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Okay, we'll stay for now. But if there's any sign, Miguel knows exactly where we are. We have to have a plan. We will, Jacob promised. For now, let's focus on making sure you're both safe here. I'll finish fixing your car so you have transportation if you need it. And maybe we should talk to Sheriff Collins. Let him know the situation. Rosa hesitated, then agreed. That's probably smart. Jacob stood up. I'll make some calls. Why don't you try to get some rest? You look exhausted. I didn't sleep much last night, Rosa admitted. After I got that text, I just kept watching the driveway, afraid he'd show up. Jacob's heart ached at the thought of her lying awake, frightened. In his home, no one's going to hurt you or Nico. Not while I'm around. For the first time that morning, Rosa smiled, a small, fragile thing, but real. I believe you. As Jacob headed downstairs to make those calls, determination filled him. He'd been unable to save Sarah from her illness, powerless as cancer took her bit by bit. But this, protecting Rosa and Nico, this was something he could do, and he would, with everything he had. The sheriff's visit later that day brought both reassurance and concern. Tom Collins was an old friend of Jacob's father, and he took Rosa's situation seriously. "I'll have my deputies keep an eye out for anyone matching Miguel's description," he promised as they sat around Jacob's kitchen table. "And I'll make sure we drive by the farm a couple extra times a day, just to be safe." "Thank you," Rosa said, relief evident in her voice. That said, the sheriff continued, his expression grave, without a restraining order or any legal documentation. "There's only so much we can do if he does show up. Legally, as the father, he has rights to see his son." Rosa's face paled. "Even though he abandoned us, even though he hit me." "Unfortunately, yes," Sheriff Collins said gently. "Unless you have documentation of the abuse or abandonment, the courts tend to favor parental rights. My advice would be to talk to a family lawyer, get the legal side of things sorted out." After the sheriff left, Rosa sat at the kitchen table, looking defeated. "A lawyer that costs money I don't have." Jacob placed a cup of tea in front of her. "I know someone. Sarah's cousin is a family lawyer in the city. She might be willing to help, maybe even work out a payment plan." Hope flickered across Rosa's face. "Really, you'd do that?" "Of course," Jacob said. "I told you, we're in this together." Rosa reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't know what I did to deserve someone like you in my life, Jacob Hayes." Jacob squeezed her hand. "You deserve a lot more than just me, Rosa Santiago." Their eyes met and held, something unspoken passing between them. Then Nico let out a happy squeal from his playpen, breaking the moment. Rosa laughed, getting up to pick up her son. "Someone's feeling better today." Jacob watched as she lifted Nico, pressing kisses to his chubby cheeks. The baby giggled, his little hands patting his mother's face. The sight filled Jacob with a warmth he hadn't felt in years, the feeling of family, of home. In that moment he knew he would do whatever it took to keep them safe, to keep them here, at Maple Hollow, where they belonged. The following week passed without any sign of Miguel. Rosa began to relax slightly, though she still checked her phone obsessively for messages and startled at unexpected sounds. Jacob finished the repairs on her car, but Rosa showed no interest in leaving. Jacob called Sarah's cousin, Diane, who agreed to help Rosa with her custody situation. They scheduled a meeting for the following week. Life at the farm settled back into its rhythm, but with subtle changes. Jacob found himself lingering over breakfast, making excuses to come back to the house during the day just to check on Rosa and Nico. And Rosa, who had been so fiercely independent, began to lean on Jacob more, asking his opinion on decisions, sharing stories from her past, letting him take more of a role in Nico's daily care. One evening, Jacob came in from the fields to find Rosa in the kitchen, dancing around with Nico in her arms. The radio was playing a Spanish song and she was singing along, her voice sweet and clear. Nico was laughing, his little head bobbing to the rhythm. Jacob stood in the doorway, transfixed. Rosa hadn't noticed him yet, and he was reluctant to interrupt the beautiful moment. But then she turned, saw him watching, and instead of stopping, she smiled and held out her hand. "Dance with us," she said. Jacob hesitated. "I'm not much of a dancer. Neither is Nico," Rosa teased. "But he's trying." With a laugh, Jacob stepped forward and took her outstretched hand. Rosa guided him in a simple box step, Nico sandwiched between them, giggling at the movement. "See, you're a natural, Rosa," said, looking up at him with bright eyes. Jacob smiled down at her, suddenly aware of how close they were. He could smell the faint scent of her shampoo, feel the warmth of her hand in his. "I have a good teacher." The song ended, but they didn't move apart. Nico reached out and patted Jacob's cheek, babbling happily. "I think he likes you," Rosa said softly. "Good," Jacob replied. "Because I like him too." His gaze held hers, and his mother. Rosa's eyes widened slightly, her lips parting in surprise. Before she could respond, the moment was shattered by the sound of tires on gravel, a car pulling up to the house. Jacob stepped to the window, his body tensing. A sleek black car had parked in the driveway, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. "Rosa," he said quietly, "take Nico upstairs." Rosa clutched her son tighter. "Is it him? Is it Miguel?" "I don't know," Jacob admitted, "but I want you both out of sight until I do." Rosa nodded, her face pale, and hurried toward the back stairs. Jacob moved to the front door, his heart pounding. He stepped onto the porch just as the car door opened and a man got out. He was tall and well-dressed with dark hair and the kind of good looks that came from money and privilege. His eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on Jacob with a predatory gaze. "Jacob Hayes?" the man asked, his voice smooth but with an edge of steel beneath. Jacob straightened, crossing his arms over his chest. "That's me, and you are." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Miguel Vasquez, I believe you have something that belongs to me." Jacob felt his muscles tense as he stared at the man before him. So this was Miguel Vasquez, the man who had abandoned Rosa and Nico, who had struck Rosa when she confronted him about his lies. Jacob's fingers curled into fists at his sides, but he kept his voice steady. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said evenly. Miguel's smile tightened. Don't play dumb, Mr. Hayes. I know Rosa and my son are here. He took a step forward, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. I tracked my car's GPS. Nice try disabling it, but I have other methods. Jacob didn't move from his position at the top of the porch steps. Even if they were here, what makes you think they belong to you? People aren't property, Mr. Vasquez. My son is my flesh and blood, Miguel said, his voice hardening. And Rosa, well, she's made some poor choices. She's not mentally stable enough to care for Nico on her own. My parents and I are concerned. Jacob nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. Concerned after you abandoned them, after you hit her. Miguel's face darkened. She told you that Rosa has quite the imagination, always playing the victim. The truth is, she's been unstable since the pregnancy. Paranoid, she took my car, my son, and ran away before we could get her the help she needs. That's not what happened, came a voice from behind Jacob. Rosa stood in the doorway, her chin raised defiantly. She had left Nico upstairs, Jacob realized, probably with the baby monitor. Rosa, Miguel said, his voice suddenly gentle, reasonable. You had me worried sick. My parents are beside themselves about Nico. Why did you run? Rosa stepped forward, stopping beside Jacob. Because I heard you on the phone. I know why you really came back for money, not for us. And when I confronted you, you hit me. Just like your father hit your mother when she disagrees with him. Miguel's charming facade slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of rage that confirmed everything Rosa had said. But just as quickly, the mask was back in place. That's a serious accusation, he said smoothly. One you can't prove. What you've done, however, taking my child across state lines without permission, that's parental kidnapping, a felony. Rosa paled but stood her ground. You weren't there when he was born. You've never paid a dime in child support. You don't even know his middle name. Legal technicalities, Miguel said with a dismissive wave. I'm on the birth certificate as his father. That gives me rights. And responsibilities, Jacob interjected, which you've clearly abandoned. Miguel's eyes narrowed as he looked at Jacob. And what exactly is your role here, Mr. Hayes? Playing house with my family. Jacob felt Rosa tense beside him. He wanted nothing more than to step in front of her, to shield her from this man's venomous words. But he knew Rosa needed to fight this battle herself. They're not your family, Jacob said firmly. You gave up that right when you walked away. Miguel laughed, a cold sound that sent a chill down Jacob's spine. How touching, the lonely farmer and the desperate single mother. Makes for a nice story, doesn't it? But this isn't a fairy tale. This is reality. And in reality, I have money, lawyers and family connections. What do you have, Rosa? Before Rosa could respond, the sound of a car approaching drew their attention. Sheriff Collins' patrol car pulled up behind Miguel's sleek vehicle. Relief washed over Jacob. He had texted the sheriff as soon as he'd seen the car pull up, hoping Tom would be nearby. Everything all right here? Sheriff Collins asked as he stepped out of his car. His hand rested casually on his belt, near his holster. Perfect timing. Sheriff, Jacob called out. Mr. Vasquez here was just leaving. Miguel's jaw tightened, but his voice remained smooth. Actually, Sheriff, I'm here to retrieve my son, who was taken from me illegally. Sheriff Collins approached, his expression neutral but his eyes alert. Is that so? Do you have any custody papers with you, Mr. Vasquez? I'm his father, Miguel said, as if that explained everything. That's not what I asked, the sheriff replied calmly. Do you have legal documentation stating you have custody of the child? Miguel's confident demeanor faltered slightly. No, but then I suggest you leave peacefully and pursue this through the proper legal channels. Sheriff Collins interrupted. Ms. Santiago hasn't broken any laws by traveling with her child in her care. Miguel looked from the sheriff to Rosa and Jacob, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. This isn't over, not by a long shot. He turned to Rosa. I'll see you in court, and trust me, you will lose. With that, he stalked back to his car, slamming the door before speeding away in a spray of gravel. Jacob felt Rosa trembling beside him. Without thinking, he put his arm around her shoulders. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded, but he could feel her shaking. Thank you for calling the sheriff. That was quick thinking. Sheriff Collins agreed, climbing the porch steps to join them. But Miguel is right about one thing, this isn't over. Men like him don't give up easily. What should we do? Rosa asked, her voice small. Get a lawyer. Fast, the sheriff advised. Establish a formal custody arrangement before he does. Document everything, his abandonment, the lack of child support, any threatening messages. And Rosa, he added gently, if he hit you, file a police report. Even if it's after the fact, it creates a record. Rosa nodded, her expression resolute despite her fear. I will. We're meeting with a lawyer next week, good Sheriff Collins said. In the meantime, I'll have deputies drive by regularly and call me immediately if he shows up again. After the sheriff left, Rosa sank into the porch swing, her face in her hands. He found her so easily all that running, and it took him less than 3 weeks. Jacob sat beside her, his hand on her back. But this time, you're not alone. You have me, the sheriff, and soon, a good lawyer on your side. Rosa looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He's going to try to take Nico. You heard him. He has money, connections. Money and connections aren't everything, Jacob said firmly. You're Nico's mother. You've cared for him since day one. Any judge with half a brain will see that. Rosa leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. I'm so tired of being afraid, Jacob, so tired of running. Jacob put his arm around her, drawing her close. Then stop running. Stand and fight. Here with me. Rosa looked up at him, something shifting in her eyes. With you, Jacob took a deep breath. Rosa, these past few weeks with you and Nico here, I've felt more alive than I have in years. I know it's fast, and I know we're in the middle of this mess with Miguel, but I need you to know I care about you, both of you, deeply. Rosa was quiet for so long that Jacob began to worry he'd said too much, too soon. But then she reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. I care about you too, she whispered, more than I thought possible. But Jacob, my life is so complicated right now. Nico has to be my priority. And with Miguel threatening to take him, I know, Jacob said, covering her hand with his, and I would never ask you to put anything before Nico. All I'm saying is that you don't have to face this alone. Whatever happens, I'm here, for both of you. Rosa's eyes searched his, and whatever she saw there must have reassured her because she leaned forward and pressed her lips softly to his. The kiss was brief, gentle, a promise rather than a passion. But when she pulled back, Jacob felt as though something fundamental had shifted between them. We should check on Nico, Rosa said softly. Jacob nodded, still feeling the warmth of her lips on his. Together, they went inside, climbed the stairs, and found Nico sleeping peacefully in his crib, unaware of the storm gathering around him. The meeting with Diane, Sarah's cousin and a respected family lawyer, went better than Rosa had dared to hope. After hearing the full story, Diane was confident they had a strong case for full custody, abandonment, failure to provide child support, the documented threat via text message. These all work in your favor, she explained as they sat in her office. The fact that you're providing a stable home for Nico is also significant. But Miguel said taking Nico across state lines was kidnapping, Rosa said, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Diane shook her head. It's not kidnapping when there's no custody order in place. You're Nico's mother and you have every right to travel with your child. What about Miguel's money? Jacob asked. He made it clear he's willing to spend whatever it takes to win. Money doesn't always win in family court, Diane assured them. Judges care about the best interests of the child. A father who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend, then suddenly reappears months later with no history of involvement in the child's life. That's not going to look good no matter how expensive his lawyer is. Rosa let out a shaky breath. So what do we do now? We file for full custody immediately, Diane said, making notes on her legal pad. We request a temporary order based on Miguel's history of abandonment and the alleged domestic violence. Rosa, are you willing to file a police report about the assault? Rosa hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I should have done it when it happened, but I was scared and just wanted to get away. Better late than never, Diane said kindly. And we'll need character witnesses, people who can testify to your parenting and the stable home you're providing for Nico. Jacob spoke up. I can do that, and I'm sure Sheriff Collins would as well. Good, Diane said, making another note. Now, about payment. Sarah was like a sister to me, so I'm willing to work with you on a payment plan. Just pay what you can, when you can. Tears welled in Rosa's eyes. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Just take care of that beautiful baby, Diane replied with a smile, and ... She glanced at Jacob. Take care of this one too. He's one of the good ones. On the drive back to the farm, Rosa was quiet, processing everything they'd discussed. Jacob reached across the seat and took her hand. What are you thinking? He asked. Rosa sighed. That this is going to get ugly before it gets better. Miguel won't go down without a fight. Neither will we, Jacob said firmly. Rosa squeezed his hand. No, we won't. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal preparations. Rosa filed a police report about Miguel's assault. Diane filed for emergency temporary custody, and they gathered documents to support their case. Through it all, life at Maple Hollow continued. Cows needed milking, fields needed tending, and Nico continued to grow, blissfully unaware of the battle being waged over him. The relationship between Jacob and Rosa deepened, though both were careful to take things slowly. There were more kisses, stolen moments on the porch after Nico was asleep, a gentle brush of lips while passing in the kitchen. Jacob began teaching Rosa about the farm, and she showed a natural aptitude for gardening, expanding the small vegetable patch behind the house. They were cautious around Nico, not wanting to confuse him, but the baby seemed to have decided Jacob was an important person in his life. He would reach for Jacob when he entered a room, babbling excitedly and showing off his newest tricks. One evening, as Rosa was giving Nico his bath, the baby looked up at Jacob, who was leaning in the bathroom doorway, and clearly said Dada. Both adults froze. Did he just ... Jacob began. Rosa nodded, her eyes wide. I think he did. Dada, Nico repeated, more insistently this time, splashing the water with his little hands. Jacob felt a rush of emotions so intense he had to grip the doorframe to steady himself. Pride, joy, fear, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility all collided in his chest. I don't want to, he stammered. Rosa's expression was a mixture of tenderness and concern. Jacob, it's okay, he's just making sounds. He doesn't understand what it means. But Jacob could see in her eyes that she wasn't entirely convinced of that, and truthfully, neither was he. In the weeks they'd been at Maple Hollow, he had become a constant in Nico's life, feeding him, playing with him, rocking him to sleep when Rosa was exhausted. Was it any wonder the baby associated him with the word for father? We should talk about this, Jacob said quietly. Rosa nodded. Later, after he's asleep. Later came, but the conversation didn't. By unspoken agreement, they both avoided the topic, afraid of what it might mean, what it might reveal about their feelings for each other and their hopes for the future. Hopes that seemed increasingly fragile as Miguel's threats escalated. He had hired an expensive lawyer from Boston who had filed counter-petitions questioning Rosa's fitness as a mother. There were demands for DNA testing, allegations of mental instability, and insinuations about Rosa's relationship with Jacob. Each new legal document brought fresh worry and stress. The night before their first court appearance, Rosa couldn't sleep. Jacob found her in the kitchen at midnight, staring into a cup of tea that had long gone cold. You should try to rest, he said gently, sitting across from her. Rosa looked up, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. What if I lose him, Jacob? What if the judge believes Miguel's lies? That won't happen, Jacob assured her, though he shared her fears. Miguel's lawyer had painted a convincing picture of Rosa as an unstable woman who had fled with another man's child, while portraying Miguel as a concerned father desperate to be part of his son's life. You don't know that, Rosa said, her voice breaking. The judge might look at Miguel successful, from a good family, and then look at me, living on your farm, no job, no family support, ... The judge will see a loving mother who has been Nico's only constant caregiver, Jacob countered. And Diane is good at what she does. She won't let Miguel's lawyer twist the facts. Rosa rubbed her temples. I keep thinking about what Miguel said, that he has money and connections. What if that's enough? What if the system fails us? Jacob reached across the table and took her hands in his. Then we'll appeal, we'll fight, as long as it takes. Rosa squeezed his hands, drawing strength from his touch. When did you become so important to us, Jacob Hayes? Probably around the same time you and Nico became everything to me, he replied softly. Rosa's eyes widened at his words. Everything. Jacob nodded, his heart pounding. He hadn't planned to say it like this, in the middle of the night before a court battle, but the truth had slipped out. Yes, everything. I love you, Rosa, both of you. I know it's fast, and I know the timing is terrible, but it's true. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Jacob, ... You don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I don't expect I love you too, she interrupted, her voice trembling but certain. I've known it for weeks but was too scared to admit it. With everything happening with Miguel, with the custody case. Jacob stood up and moved around the table, pulling Rosa to her feet and into his arms. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her tears dampen his shirt. Whatever happens tomorrow, he whispered, we face it together. And the day after that, and the day after that. I'm not going anywhere, Rosa. Not ever. Rosa looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears and something else. Hope, perhaps, or love. Promise. Promise, Jacob said, and sealed it with a kiss. The county courthouse was imposing, all marble and echoing halls. Rosa gripped Jacob's hand tightly as they followed Diane toward the courtroom. She was wearing a simple blue dress that Jacob had insisted on buying for her, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She looked beautiful, but terrified. Remember, Diane said as they approached the doors, let me do the talking. Answer questions honestly but briefly. Don't let Miguel or his lawyer provoke you. Rosa nodded, her face pale. What about Nico? I hate leaving him, today of all days. Mrs. Johnson is wonderful with him, Jacob reassured her, referring to the elderly neighbor who had agreed to babysit. And the farm is the last place Miguel would look. As they entered the courtroom, Rosa's steps faltered. Miguel was already there, sitting beside his lawyer in an expensive suit, looking every inch. The successful businessman, when he saw Rosa, he gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The hearing began with opening statements from both lawyers. Miguel's attorney painted him as a devoted father, cruelly separated from his son by an unstable mother, Diane countered, with the facts of Miguel's abandonment, his failure to provide support, and the documented assault. When it was Rosa's turn to testify, she gripped the edge of the witness stand, her knuckles white, but her voice was steady as she told her story. The pregnancy, Miguel's promises, his disappearance, and his violent return. And where are you living now, Miss Santiago? Miguel's lawyer asked during cross-examination at Maple Hollow Farm, with Jacob Hayes. Rosa answered truthfully. And what is the nature of your relationship with Mr. Hayes? Rosa hesitated, glancing at Jacob in the gallery. We're close friends, the lawyer smirked. Just friends. You've been living in his home for nearly 2 months. Are you suggesting there's nothing more between you? Objection, Diane interjected. Relevance goes to the stability of the child's home environment, Miguel's lawyer countered. I'll allow it, the judge said. The witness will answer. Rosa took a deep breath. Jacob and I cared deeply for each other. He has been a support to me and Nico when we had nowhere else to turn. So you moved your infant son in with a man you barely knew, the lawyer pressed. A man with no relation to your child. Doesn't that demonstrate poor judgment on your part? Rosa's chin lifted. No, it demonstrates that I was willing to do whatever it took to keep my son safe from a man who had already abandoned us once and hurt me when I confronted him. Jacob has shown Nico nothing but love and care, which is more than I can say for his biological father. Miguel's face darkened at her words, but his lawyer moved on. Miss Santiago, do you have a job? Any income of your own? Not currently, Rosa admitted. I've been focused on caring for Nico. So you're financially dependent on Mr. Hayes, a man you've known for less than 2 months. Temporarily, yes, Rosa said. But I've been applying for jobs in town, and I help with the farm work. But the fact remains that you cannot support your child on your own, the lawyer said triumphantly. While Mr. Vasquez has a stable career, family support, and the financial means to provide the best for his son. The best, Rosa repeated, her voice rising slightly. The best would have been having a father who was there from the beginning. The best would have been not having to run because I was afraid for our safety. No further questions, the lawyer said, returning to his seat with a satisfied smile. Jacob was called next, testifying to Rosa's dedication as a mother in the stable home life they had established at Maple Hollow. Miguel's lawyer attempted to portray him as a lonely man taking advantage of Rosa's vulnerable situation. But Jacob remained calm, his answers honest and direct. Mr. Hayes, the lawyer asked, what are your intentions toward Ms. Santiago and her child? Jacob looked directly at Rosa as he answered, to support them however they need for as long as they want me in their lives. Even though the child has a father, a biological father who wants to be part of his life. Jacob's jaw tightened. Nico has a biological father who abandoned him before he was born and has shown no interest in him until recently. What he needs are people who love him and put his needs first. And you believe you know what's best for another man's child after less than 2 months. I believe Rosa knows what's best for her son, Jacob replied firmly. And I support her completely. The testimony continued throughout the day. Sheriff Collins spoke about Miguel's threatening behavior at the farm. Diane presented the text message Miguel had sent, as well as documentation of his absence during Rosa's pregnancy and Nico's birth. Miguel testified, painting himself as a misunderstood father, whose only crime was wanting to be part of his son's life. By the time the judge called for a recess to consider her ruling, Rosa was exhausted. She and Jacob sat on a bench in the courthouse hallway, waiting anxiously. You did great in there, Jacob told her, his arm around her shoulders. So did you, she replied, leaning against him. I just wish it was over. It will be soon, he promised. One way or another. Rosa looked up at him. If it doesn't go our way, if Miguel gets custody, We'll appeal, Jacob said firmly. We won't give up. But what if Rosa? Jacob interrupted gently, taking her face in his hands. I meant what I said in there. I'm with you both for as long as you want me. Whatever happens today doesn't change that. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything good in this world, Jacob said, pressing his forehead to hers. And I plan to spend every day trying to give it to you. A court officer appeared in the hallway. The judge is ready to deliver her ruling. Rosa took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and stood. Jacob took her hand, and together they walked back into the courtroom to face whatever came next. The judge, an older woman with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes, looked at the parties assembled before her. This is not an easy case, she began. Both sides have presented compelling arguments. Mr. Vasquez has demonstrated that he has the financial resources to provide for the child. Ms. Santiago has shown that she has been the child's primary caregiver since birth. She paused, looking directly at Miguel. However, I cannot ignore the documented evidence of Mr. Vasquez's abandonment during the pregnancy and early months of the child's life. Nor can I dismiss the police report regarding the alleged assault, even if it was filed after the fact. Miguel's face tightened, but he remained silent. Furthermore, the judge continued, while Ms. Santiago's current living situation may be unconventional, it appears to provide a stable and loving environment for the child. Mr. Hayes has demonstrated a genuine commitment to both Ms. Santiago and her son. Rosa squeezed Jacob's hand so tightly it hurt, but he didn't pull away. Therefore, the judge announced, I am granting temporary full custody to Ms. Santiago, with supervised visitation rights for Mr. Vasquez, to be arranged through the court. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months to determine if a more permanent custody arrangement is appropriate. Rosa let out a shaky breath, tears of relief streaming down her face. Jacob put his arm around her, holding her close as she trembled with emotion. Across the courtroom, Miguel stood abruptly, his face a mask of rage. This is not over, he said, his voice carrying in the quiet room. not by a long shot. Mr. Vasquez, the judge said sharply, I suggest you accept this ruling gracefully. Your behavior now will be noted when we revisit this case in 6 months. Miguel's lawyer put a restraining hand on his arm, murmuring something in his ear. With a final glare at Rosa and Jacob, Miguel allowed himself to be led from the courtroom. We won, Rosa whispered, turning to Jacob. We really won. For now, Diane cautioned. Joining them, the supervised visitation will begin next week, and we'll need to prepare for the review in 6 months. Miguel isn't likely to give up, but we have time, Jacob said, his arm still around Rosa. Time to build a stronger case. Time to show that Maple Hollow is the best place for Nico. Rosa nodded, wiping away her tears. And time to build a real life there. Together, as they left the courthouse, stepping into the bright afternoon sunlight, Rosa stopped and turned to Jacob. Take me home, she said simply. Take us home. Jacob smiled, his heart full to bursting. Home, he agreed. Where you both belong. But as they drove back to Maple Hollow, neither noticed the sleek black car that pulled away from the curb to follow them, keeping a careful distance. Inside, Miguel Vasquez's hands gripped the steering wheel, his face set in determined lines. This wasn't over. Not even close. The victory in court brought a new sense of peace to Maple Hollow Farm. Rosa walked with lighter steps, no longer jumping at every unexpected sound. Jacob whistled as he worked in the fields, his heart full of hope for the future. And Nico thrived, growing stronger and more curious by the day. The supervised visits with Miguel began as ordered by the court. Every Saturday morning, Jacob would Dr. Rosa and Nico to the Family Services Center in town, where Miguel would spend 2 hours with his son under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor. Rosa hated these visits, hated seeing Miguel hold Nico, but she complied with the court's orders perfectly. How was it? Jacob would ask when he picked them up, his face tight with concern. The same, Rosa would answer with a sigh. Miguel puts on a good show for the supervisor, all smiles and baby talk, but his eyes, they're cold when he looks at me like he's just waiting for his chance. Jacob wanted to tell her she was imagining things, that Miguel was accepting the court's decision, but he couldn't bring himself to lie. He had seen that look in Miguel's eyes at the courthouse. Calculation, determination, rage. He won't get that chance, Jacob promised instead. We won't let our guard down. And they didn't. They were careful to lock the doors at night, to check the property before letting Nico play outside. Sheriff Collins kept his promise to have deputies drive by regularly. Slowly, as weeks passed with no sign of trouble from Miguel, they began to relax. Life settled into a new rhythm. Rosa found a part-time job at the local library, working while Nico stayed with Jacob on the farm. In the evenings, they would cook dinner together, play with Nico, and then, after he was asleep, spend quiet hours on the porch swing, talking about everything and nothing. I want to contribute more, Rosa said one evening, nestled against Jacob's side. To the farm, to our expenses. Jacob kissed the top of her head. You already do more than your share. The vegetable garden has never looked better, and those pies you've been baking for the farmer's market are bringing in good money. It's not enough, Rosa insisted. I don't want to be dependent on you, Jacob. That's not the kind of relationship I want. Jacob was quiet for a moment, thinking, what kind of relationship do you want? He finally asked. Rosa shifted to look up at him. An equal one. A partnership. I want that too, Jacob said softly. So what are you thinking? I've been researching small business grants for women, Rosa explained. There's one specifically for Hispanic women entrepreneurs in rural areas. I could apply, maybe start something here at the farm. Homemade jams and baked goods. Maybe expand the vegetable garden into a proper market garden. Jacob's face lit up. That's a brilliant idea. We could convert the old dairy shed into a farm store, sell your products, maybe some of my beef and milk too. Really? Rosa asked, her eyes shining. You'd be willing to make space for my business here? Rosa, Jacob said earnestly, taking her hands in his. This isn't just my farm anymore. It's our home. Yours, mine, and Nico. I want you to put down roots here, to build something that's yours. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. I never thought I'd have this, she whispered, a place where I belong. Someone who believes in me. You have it now, Jacob assured her. And you'll never lose it, I promise. As autumn deepened into winter, Maple Hollow transformed. The old dairy shed was cleaned out and renovated into a charming farm store. Rosa's grant application was approved, providing enough money for commercial kitchen equipment and supplies. She named her business Nico's Harvest and filled the shelves with jars of homemade jam, fresh baked bread, and seasonal pies. Jacob expanded the vegetable garden, adding a small greenhouse so Rosa could grow herbs year-round. Local restaurants began placing orders for her fresh produce and baked goods. The farm, which had been just scraping by on Jacob's cattle operation, began to flourish with this new venture. Through it all, Miguel continued his supervised visits with Nico. On the surface, he played the role of the devoted father perfectly. He brought age-appropriate toys, took countless photos, and charmed the supervisors with his apparent dedication. But Rosa noticed that his questions about Nico's care became more pointed, more probing, as if looking for any mistakes she might have made. He asked if Nico had been to the doctor recently. Rosa told Jacob after one visit. And when I said yes, for his regular checkup, Miguel wanted to know the doctor's name, the exact date, even what vaccines he received. He's building a case, Jacob said grimly, looking for anything he can use against you at the 6-month review. Rosa nodded, her joy in their new business momentarily dimmed. That's what I thought too. He's just biding his time. The 6th review loomed larger as winter gave way to early spring. Rosa and Jacob met with Diane regularly, providing updates on Nico's development, Rosa's new business, and their stable home life. But Miguel's lawyer was building his own case, focusing on Miguel's perfect attendance at every supervised visit and his apparent transformation into a devoted father. It's all an act, Rosa insisted during one meeting with Diane. He doesn't care about Nico. He just can't stand that I've built a life without him, that I'm happy. Unfortunately, we can't prove his motives, Diane said. We can only demonstrate that you're providing a stable, loving home for Nico. And on that front, you're doing everything right. The business, the job at the library, your relationship with Jacob, it all shows that you've created a secure environment for your son. What about our relationship? Jacob asked. Will that be an issue? We're not married. Diane considered this. It might come up. The judge might want assurance about the permanence of your living arrangement. Jacob and Rosa exchanged a look. They hadn't discussed marriage, though both had thought about it. The timing had never seemed right, with the custody case hanging over them. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Rosa said, but the question lingered between them on the drive home. That night, after Nico was asleep, Jacob found Rosa in the kitchen, packing jars of apple butter for a restaurant order due the next day. About what Diane said today, he began, leaning against the counter. Rosa's hand stilled. The marriage thing. Jacob, you don't have to. I want to, he interrupted. Marry you, I mean. Not because of the court case or what the judge might think, because I love you. Because I can't imagine my life without you and Nico in it. Rosa looked up, her eyes wide. Are you proposing? Jacob smiled sheepishly. Not very well, apparently. I had a whole speech planned. And a ring. It's upstairs, hidden in my sock drawer. I was waiting for the right moment. Rosa put down the jar she was holding and moved to stand in front of him. This is the right moment, she said softly. Just us, in our kitchen, at the end of a regular day. It's perfect. Jacob took her hands in his. Rosa Santiago, will you marry me? Be my wife. Let me be a father to Nico. Build a life with me here at Maple Hollow. Tears spilled down Rosa's cheeks as she nodded. Yes. She whispered yes to all of it. Jacob pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his joy. Their laughter mingled as he spun her around the kitchen, both of them giddy with happiness. When he finally set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deeply. Wait here, he said when they broke apart. I want to do this properly. He ran upstairs and returned a moment later with a small velvet box. Inside was a simple but beautiful ring with a single diamond. It was my grandmother's, Jacob explained as he slipped it onto Rosa's finger. Sarah never wanted it. She preferred the new one I bought her, but I always thought it was beautiful. Classic. It's perfect, Rosa said, admiring the way it caught. The light. I love it, and I love you. Jacob Hayes. They decided to keep their engagement a secret until after the custody review. No big announcement. No party, just a quiet knowledge between them that their future was set. But their happiness was soon overshadowed by troubling developments. The week before the review, Miguel missed a supervised visit for the first time. When the center called him, he claimed a work emergency had taken him out of town unexpectedly. I don't like it, Rosa said that night. He hasn't missed a single visit in 6 months. Why now, right before the review? Maybe it really was work, Jacob suggested, but he shared her unease. 2 days later, their worry deepened when Sheriff Collins stopped by the farm. Just wanted to give you a heads up, he said, as they sat at the kitchen table. Miguel Vasquez was seen at the Blue Ridge Motel on the edge of town. He checked in yesterday. Rosa's face paled. The visits are on Saturdays. Why would he be here, midweek? That's what concerned me, the sheriff said. I had a deputy drive by, just keeping an eye on things. Miguel's been making calls, meeting with someone. We couldn't get close enough to see who. Could be his lawyer, Jacob suggested. Preparing for the review. Could be, Sheriff Collins agreed, though he didn't sound convinced. Just keep your eyes open, and call me if anything seems off. After he left, Rosa stood by the window, watching Nico play in the yard with the puppy they had adopted a month earlier. I have a bad feeling, Jacob. Something's not right. Jacob put his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. We'll be extra careful. No one's going to hurt you or Nico. Not while I'm around. But that night, as a spring storm raged outside, Rosa woke with a start. Something had pulled her from sleep. A sound, a feeling. She wasn't sure. She reached for Jacob beside her, but his side of the bed was empty. Probably checking on the new calves, she thought. They had 3 born just that week. Rosa was about to lie back down when she heard it. A faint creak from Nico's room across the hall. It could have been the old house settling in the wind, but maternal instinct had her out of bed in an instant. She crossed the hall quickly, pushing open the door to Nico's room. Lightning flashed, illuminating a scene that turned her blood to ice. Miguel stood over Nico's crib, a packed bag at his feet, reaching down to lift the sleeping child. "Get away from him," Rosa cried, lunging forward. Miguel's head snapped up, his face twisting with anger at being caught. "He's my son," he hissed. "Mine, not yours and the farmer's." "Put him down," Rosa demanded, moving closer now. But Miguel had already lifted Nico, who was beginning to stir, confused by the unfamiliar hands holding him. "I'm taking what's mine," Miguel said. "I have a new life set up for us in California. New identities, everything. You'll never find us." Rosa's mind raced. Jacob was out in the barn. The sheriff was miles away. She was alone with a man who had already proven he could hurt her. But this was her son, her baby, and she would not let him be taken. "You're not taking him anywhere," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Put him back in his crib. Miguel, if you leave now, I won't call the police." Miguel laughed, a cold sound that raised the hair on the back of Rosa's neck. "If you think I'm afraid of the police, my father's lawyers will have any charges dismissed before breakfast." "No, Rosa, I'm done playing by the rules. The judge is going to give you custody next week. I saw the preliminary recommendation. So I'm taking matters into my own hands." Nico was fully awake now, his face crumpling as he realized the person holding him wasn't his mother or Jacob. He began to cry, reaching his arms out toward Rosa. "Mama, Mama," he wailed. The sound of her son's distress broke something open in Rosa's fear gave way to a fierce, protective rage. She lunged forward, no longer caring about her own safety. "Let him go," she demanded, grabbing Miguel's arm. Miguel shoved her back with his free hand, sending her stumbling against the dresser. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he snarled. "You lost, Rosa. Accept it." Rosa steadied herself, ignoring the pain where her hip had struck the corner of the dresser. "I will never stop looking for him," she promised. "Never. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." Something flickered in Miguel's eyes, doubt, perhaps, or calculation. Nico was screaming now, his little face red with distress, still reaching for his mother. "Shut up," Miguel hissed at the child, giving him a small shake. "Stop crying." But Nico only cried harder, his wails piercing the night. And then, through his tears, he called out a different word. "Dada, a dada." Miguel's face darkened with rage. "I'm your father," he said, giving Nico another shake. "Not that farmer me." Rosa saw her chance in Miguel's distraction. She grabbed the heavy lamp from the dresser and swung it with all her strength, striking Miguel's arm. He cried out in pain, his grip on Nico loosening just enough for Rosa to snatch her son away. She backed toward the door. Nico clutched tightly to her chest, but Miguel recovered quickly, his face contorted with fury. "You'll regret that," he threatened, advancing on them. Rosa turned to run, but Miguel caught her by the hair, yanking her backward. Pain exploded across her scalp, but she refused to let go of Nico, who was screaming in terror. "Let her go," came a deep voice from the doorway. Jacob stood there, his clothes damp from the rain, his face a mask of cold fury. In his hands was the shotgun he kept for predators that sometimes threatened the livestock. Miguel froze, his hand still tangled in Rosa's hair. "This doesn't concern you," he spat. "This is between me and the mother of my child." "That's where you're wrong," Jacob said, his voice dangerously calm. "Anything that threatens Rosa or Nico concerns me. Now, let her go and step back." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Miguel released his grip on Rosa's hair. She immediately moved to Jacob's side, still holding Nico tightly. "You won't shoot me," Miguel said, eyeing the shotgun. "You're not the type. Too decent to law-abiding." "You're right," Jacob agreed, not lowering the gun. "I won't shoot you, but I will hold you here until the sheriff arrives." He nodded toward Rosa. "Call Sheriff Collins." Rosa hesitated, reluctant to leave Jacob alone with Miguel, but Nico was still crying, and she needed to get him to safety. She backed out of the room, keeping her eyes on Miguel until she was in the hallway. As soon as she was gone, Miguel's demeanor changed. The mask of civilized restraint dropped, revealing the rage beneath. "You think you've won," he sneered, "playing house with my woman, my son, but you're nothing. A dirt farmer with a failing business. What can you give them that I can't?" "Love," Jacob said simply. "Safety. Respect. All the things you never gave Rosa. All the things Nico deserves from a father." Miguel's face twisted. "You are not his father." "Maybe not by blood," Jacob acknowledged, "but in all the ways that matter. I'm the one who rocks him to sleep when he has nightmares. I'm the one who makes him laugh, who reads him stories, who kisses his scrapes better. Where were you for all of that, Miguel?" Miguel lunged forward suddenly, his control snapping. Jacob was prepared for the attack, sidestepping and using the butt of the shotgun to push Miguel back. But Miguel was quicker than he expected, grabbing the barrel of the gun and twisting it away. The two men grappled, crashing into furniture as each fought for control. Miguel was younger, fueled by rage and the desperation of a man who knew he had lost everything, but Jacob was stronger, hardened by years of physical labor on the farm, and driven by something more powerful than anger, love for the family he was protecting. Miguel landed a solid punch to Jacob's jaw, sending him staggering back. But Jacob recovered quickly, tackling Miguel around the waist and driving him into the wall. Picture frames crashed to the floor as the men struggled. "You can't win," Miguel gasped, his arms locked around Jacob's throat. "I'll never stop coming for them. Never." Jacob broke Miguel's hold with a sharp elbow to the ribs, then spun to face him. "Yes," he said, breathing hard, "you will." With that, Jacob delivered a powerful right hook that caught Miguel square on the jaw. The younger man crumpled, unconscious before he hit the floor. Jacob stood over him, chest heaving, knuckles bleeding. The fight had lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. He quickly checked that Miguel was still breathing, then secured his hands with a belt from the dresser. He found Rosa in the kitchen, Nico coma now but still clinging to his mother. She had the phone pressed to her ear. "They're on their way," she said, relief flooding her face when she saw Jacob. "Are you okay? You're bleeding." Jacob touched his split lip, wincing. "I'm fine. Miguel's unconscious, tied up in Nico's room. He won't be going anywhere until the sheriff gets here." Rosa set the phone down and moved to him, her free hand touching his face gently. "You saved us." Jacob shook his head. "You saved yourselves. I just finished what you started." He pressed a kiss to Nico's head, then to Rosa's lips. "You're both safe now. It's over." But it wasn't quite over. When Sheriff Collins arrived with 2 deputies, Miguel was arrested for breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, and assault. As they led him to the patrol car, he looked back at Rosa and Jacob standing on the porch, Nico between them. "This isn't the end," he called out. "He's still my son." Sheriff Collins pushed him into the back of the car. "Save it for the judge. Vasquez, you've got bigger problems now." After they had given their statements and the police had finally left, Rosa and Jacob sat on the couch, Nico asleep between them, exhausted from the night's events. "Do you think Miguel was right?" Rosa asked quietly. "That this isn't over?" Jacob considered this. "In a way, no, it's not over. Miguel is Nico's biological father. That's a fact that will always be part of his life." He stroked Nico's dark hair gently. "But the threat, the fear, yes, that part is over. Miguel crossed a line tonight that can't be uncrossed. No judge will grant him custody now. No supervised visits. Nothing." Rosa leaned her head on Jacob's shoulder, the weight of constant vigilance finally lifting. "We're free," she whispered. "Really free." "Yes," Jacob agreed, putting his arm around her. "Free to live our lives. To be a family." "A family," Rosa repeated, the word filled with wonder. She looked down at the engagement ring on her finger, then up at Jacob. "When should we get married?" Jacob smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Whenever you want." "Tomorrow, next week, next year. I'm not going anywhere." "Soon," Rosa decided. "Very soon." They were married 2 months later in the backyard of Maple Hollow Farm. It was a simple ceremony, attended by a few friends from town, Sheriff Collins and his wife Diane and her family, and even Maria, the waitress who had sent Rosa to Jacob. In the first place, Rosa wore a simple white dress that she had found in a vintage shop in town. Jacob wore a new suit, the first he had bought since Sarah's funeral. But this time, the suit was for a beginning, not an ending. Nico, now walking confidently at 18 months old, toddled down the makeshift aisle carrying a small pillow with their rings, though Diane walked beside him to make sure the rings actually made it to the altar as they exchanged vows under an arch of wildflowers that Jacob had built himself. Rosa couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come, from that desperate night when she had arrived on Jacob's porch with nothing but a diaper bag and a sleeping baby, to this moment becoming a family in the eyes of the law, as they had already been in their hearts. Miguel was awaiting trial, having been denied bail due to the risk of flight. His parents, shocked by his actions, had finally seen him for who he truly was and had reached out to Rosa with an offer of financial support for Nico. After much discussion, Rosa and Jacob had agreed to set up a college fund with the money, but otherwise wanted no connection to the Vasquez family. "By the power vested in me," the justice of the peace said, beaming at the couple, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Jacob cupped Rosa's face in his hands, looking into her eyes with such love that she felt tears spring to her own. "Thank you," he whispered, just for her to hear, "for bringing life back to Maple Hollow, for bringing life back to me." "Thank you," she whispered back, "for being the home I never thought I'd find." Their kiss was sweet and full of promise. When they turned to face their friends, Nico raised his arms, demanding to be part of the moment. Jacob scooped him up, settling him between them, and the crowd applauded the new family later. As the small reception wound down and the sun began to set over the hills, Jacob found Rosa standing on the porch looking out over the farm. "Happy?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered, leaning back against him. "The farm store is thriving, Nico is growing like a weed, and I just married the kindest man I've ever known. How could I not be happy?" Jacob pressed a kiss to her temple. "We still have challenges ahead. Farms are never easy, and someday we'll have to explain to Nico about Miguel." "I know," Rosa acknowledged, "but we'll face it together. All of it together." Jacob agreed. From inside the house came the sound of Nico's laughter as he played with Maria. The evening light turned the fields golden. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh-cut hay. Rosa turned in Jacob's arms, looking up at the man who had become her husband, her partner, the father of her child in all the ways that truly mattered. Do you ever think about how close we came to missing this? If Maria hadn't given me your name, if I hadn't found the courage to knock on your door that night, ... double quote. Jacob shook his head. I don't think we would have missed it. Somehow we would have found each other. Some things are just meant to be. Rosa smiled, standing on tiptoe to kiss. Ithim, I think you're right. This us, Nico, Maple Hollow, this was always waiting for us, our place to call home. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jacob took his wife's hand and led her back inside, to their son, to their friends, to the warmth and light of the home they had built together. Not just a house, not just a farm, but a true haven, the place where three hearts beat beneath the same roof, no longer just surviving but thriving, the place they all belonged.